This first story comes from Linda, an ICU nurse with 15 years of experience at a major teaching hospital in Chicago. Linda has seen everything you'd expect in intensive care. She's comfortable with death, familiar with loss, and trained to handle medical emergencies that would traumatize most people. But what happened to her during a shift last October still gives her nightmares. Linda was working the overnight shift in the ICU, which runs from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. The unit had 24 beds, but that night only 18 were occupied. Room 237, at the end of the east hallway, had been empty for 3 days following the death of an elderly patient named Mr. Chun. Mr. Chun had been Linda's patient during his final weeks. He'd been in the ICU for 2 months following complications from surgery, and over that time, Linda had grown attached to him. He was kind, grateful for every small comfort, and even in his weakened state, he always asked about Linda's family and remembered details from their conversations. When Mr. Chin passed away, Linda took it harder than she usually did. She'd been his primary nurse, and his family had specifically thanked her for making his final days as comfortable as possible. Room 237 had been deep cleaned and was ready for a new patient, but the bed assignments hadn't filled it yet. Hospital policy required that empty rooms be checked every 2 hours during night shifts, so at midnight, Linda made her routine walk down the east hallway. As she approached room 237, she noticed the heart monitor was on. This was odd because all equipment is powered down and unplugged when rooms are empty. Linda assumed housekeeping had forgotten to turn it off during cleaning, so she entered the room to switch it off. But when she looked at the monitor, it was displaying a steady heart rhythm. Not the flat line you'd expect from a disconnected machine, but the regular rhythm of someone sleeping peacefully. Linda checked the leads. They weren't connected to anything. The monitor was receiving a signal, but there was no source. She unplugged the machine from the wall. The rhythm continued, powered by the backup battery that shouldn't have been active. Linda stood there staring at the monitor, watching the steady heartbeat pattern that looked exactly like Mr. Chin's normal sleeping rhythm from the weeks she'd cared for him. Then the call light above the bed turned on. In an empty room, with no patient, the call light was requesting a nurse. Linda's training kicked in. She pressed the call button to respond and said, "This is Linda. How can I help you?" Silence. She tried again. "Hello? This is your nurse. Did you press the call button?" Then, through the intercom, she heard a voice she recognized. Weak, but unmistakably Mr. Chin's voice. "Linda, could you please turn down the lights? They're too bright." Linda felt her blood go cold. She looked around the room. Only the standard overnight lighting was on, the same dim level maintained in all empty rooms. "Mr. Chun," she whispered, "thank you for taking such good care of me." The voice continued through the intercom. "I wanted to make sure you knew. I'm comfortable now. The pain is gone." Linda ran from the room and immediately called security. When the security officer arrived, the heart monitor was off, unplugged, with a dead battery. The call light was inactive. The intercom showed no record of recent communication. But Linda wasn't finished with room 237. 2 days later, the room was assigned to a new patient, a middle-aged woman recovering from a stroke. Linda wasn't assigned to that room, but around 2 a.m., she saw the call light for 237 activate. The nurse assigned to that room was busy with another patient, so Linda responded. When she entered the room, The stroke patient was sleeping peacefully, but the woman's daughter, who had been dozing in the bedside chair, was wide awake and looked terrified. "Did you hear that?" the daughter whispered to Linda. "Hear what?" "Someone was talking to my mother." A man's voice. He was telling her that the nurses here are wonderful, that they'll take good care of her. But there's no one else in the room. This next story comes from Marcus, who worked as a night orderly at a regional medical center in Pennsylvania. Marcus's job involved transporting patients, moving equipment, and handling various tasks that kept the hospital running during overnight hours. The medical center was a 7-story building, with patient floors on levels 2 through 6. The basement housed the morgue, storage, and mechanical systems. The 7th floor was administrative offices, mostly empty at night. Marcus had been working nights for about 8 months when he started noticing something odd about elevator number 3. The hospital had 4 elevators, but elevator 3 had developed a peculiar habit. During night shifts, it would frequently stop at the 7th floor on its own, despite no one calling for it. The doors would remain open for exactly 30 seconds, then close and return to whatever floor it had been summoned to. Marcus initially assumed it was a mechanical issue and reported it to maintenance several times. The technicians could never find anything wrong with it. The elevator functioned perfectly during the day. The problem only occurred during night shifts, typically between midnight and 4 a.m. After a few weeks of this, Marcus started paying closer attention to elevator 3's behavior. He noticed that it didn't stop at the 7th floor randomly. It only happened when the elevator was transporting patients who had died during the night shift. When Marcus was moving a deceased patient from a room to the morgue, elevator 3 would make its unauthorized stop at the 7th floor. When he was transporting living patients or equipment, the elevator functioned normally. Okay, I'm heading there now. But this is really weird. The car is still following me, still no headlights. How is the driver even seeing where they're going? Tom stayed on the line with David as he drove toward Clearwater. But something about the call was bothering him. David's voice was too calm for someone who was genuinely frightened, and the detail about no headlights seemed impossible. "David, are you sure about the headlights? It would be almost impossible to drive Highway 71 at night without lights." "I know it sounds crazy, but I'm looking right at it in my rearview mirror. No headlights, but I can clearly see the car. It's like the moonlight is shining directly on it, making it visible." Tom felt a chill. He'd lived in this area his whole life, and he knew that stretch of Highway 71. On a cloudy February night, there wouldn't be enough moonlight to see an unlit vehicle. "David, I'm going to stay on the line with you until you reach the gas station. The trooper should be there waiting." "Thank you. I'm about 10 miles out now. The car is still behind me. This is I can't explain what I'm seeing." Tom radioed the state trooper. "Unit 47, what's your status at the Clearwater station?" "I'm here, dispatch. No sign of the Honda Civic yet, but I'll keep watching." Tom continued talking to David, but the man's responses were becoming more distant, like he was concentrating on something else. "David, are you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here, but something's wrong. The car behind me. It's getting closer, and I can see inside it now. There's someone in the driver's seat, but they're slumped over the wheel." Tom's blood went cold. "David, do not stop your vehicle. Keep driving to the gas station. I don't think they're alive," David continued, his voice now genuinely frightened. The person in the car, their head is at an odd angle, like their neck is broken. But the car is still following me perfectly. We wait here, Mr. Patterson explained. Before we move on, it's peaceful on the 7th floor. Quiet. And we wanted to thank the people who cared for us. The elevator doors began to close. Marcus reached for the button to hold them open, but Mr. Patterson held up his hand. "Take care of Mrs. Rodriguez," he said. "She's ready to join us now. And Marcus, thank you for treating us like people, not just bodies. That means more than you know." The doors closed, and the elevator continued to the basement. Marcus completed his task in the morgue, but he couldn't stop thinking about what he'd seen. When he returned upstairs, he immediately took elevator 3 to the 7th floor to investigate. The hallway was empty and dark, but it didn't feel empty, if that makes sense. It felt inhabited. Marcus started asking other night staff about the 7th floor. What he learned made his experience even more unsettling. The 7th floor had originally been patient rooms when the hospital first opened in 1965. But in 1978, following a series of unexplained deaths and patients' complaints about disturbing presences, the entire floor was converted to administrative use. The deaths had all occurred in room 717, always during night shifts, always involving patients who were expected to recover. No medical explanation was ever found for these deaths, but they stopped completely once patient care was moved away from the 7th floor. Room 717 was now used for storage, but Marcus learned from security that the motion sensors in that room activated frequently during night shifts, despite no one having access to it. Marcus continued working at the hospital for 6 more months after his encounter. Elevator 3 continued its pattern of stopping at the 7th floor when transporting deceased patients. But Marcus never saw Mr. Patterson or the others again. However, he did notice something else. Family members of patients who had passed away sometimes reported dreams or brief visitations from their loved ones. In these encounters, the deceased person always mentioned being in a peaceful place in the hospital, waiting with others who had been well cared for. They specifically mentioned a kind, orderly named Marcus who had treated them with respect and dignity. Marcus eventually left the hospital to work in a different field, but he sent me documentation of the elevator maintenance records, showing the repeated reports of mechanical issues that were never resolved. He also provided copies of the historical records about the 7th floor's conversion and the unexplained deaths in room 717. Sometimes, it seems, the boundary between life and death isn't as clear as we'd like to believe. And sometimes, those who have crossed that boundary want to express their gratitude to those who showed them kindness in their final moments. This third story is the hardest one for me to share, and I'll warn you now that it involves children. If you're sensitive to content involving pediatric patients, you may want to skip ahead to the final story. This comes from Jennifer, a pediatric nurse who worked at a children's hospital in Denver. Jennifer had been working in pediatric care for 12 years, specializing in critical care for seriously ill children. It's one of the most emotionally demanding jobs in healthcare, and Jennifer was exceptionally good at it. The children's hospital where Jennifer worked had a special ward for terminally ill patients, children who were receiving palliative care rather than curative treatment. This ward was designed to be as comfortable and home-like as possible, with family sleeping areas, play spaces, and a staff trained specifically in end-of-life care for children. Jennifer often worked the night shift in this ward, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Night shifts in pediatric palliative care are unique. They're quieter, more peaceful, but also heavy with the weight of families spending what might be their final nights with their children. In the spring of last year, Jennifer was caring for a 7-year-old boy named Tommy who was in the final stages of leukemia. Tommy had been in the hospital for several weeks, and Jennifer had become very attached to him. He was brave, funny, and despite his illness, he always tried to cheer up the other children in the ward. Tommy's room was at the end of the hall, room 314. Across the hall in room 313 was Emma, a 5-year-old girl with a rare genetic condition. The two children had become friends, and their families had grown close during their parallel journeys. On a Tuesday night in April, Tommy passed away peacefully in his sleep around 2:30 a.m. His family was with him, and Jennifer was there to help them through those final moments. It was heartbreaking, but as peaceful as such a situation could be. Long pause, then two beeps. Okay, stay where you are. Officers are on their way. Is the person who might hurt you in the same room as you right now? 1 for yes, 2 for no. Instead of beeps, Rachel heard something that made her blood run cold. A child's voice, very faint, as if coming from far away. "Mommy, why won't you answer me?" Rachel felt her heart race. "Hello? Is there a child there? If you can hear me, I need you to respond." "Mommy, you're scaring me. Why are you just standing there?" Rachel could hear footsteps, small ones, like a child walking around. "Mommy, there are people at the door. Should I let them in?" Rachel immediately radioed the responding officers. Unit 12, approach with extreme caution. We have a child at the residence. Adult caller unable to speak. Possible domestic situation in progress. Through the phone, Rachel could hear knocking and police officers identifying themselves. Then she heard the child's voice again. "Mommy, the police want to come in. Why won't you move?" Rachel heard the front door open and officers entering the house. Unit 12, we're inside the residence. Came the radio call. "We have a situation here. Requesting detective unit and coroner." Rachel's heart sank. In domestic violence situations, calls for the coroner usually meant they were too late. But what the officers found was far more disturbing than a typical domestic violence case. They found a woman standing in the middle of the living room, completely motionless, staring straight ahead. She was alive, breathing, but completely unresponsive to any stimulus. No injuries, no signs of struggle, no indication of what had caused her catatonic state. More importantly, there was no child in the house. The woman was identified as Jennifer Walsh, a single mother who lived alone. According to neighbors, she had a 4-year-old daughter named Emma, but Emma had died in a car accident 6 months earlier. Jennifer had been found in the exact position the officers described many times before. Neighbors reported that for the past month, they had occasionally seen Jennifer standing motionless in her living room for hours at a time, always in the same spot, always staring in the same direction. The direction she was staring was toward Emma's bedroom, which Jennifer had left exactly as it was when Emma died. Rachel stayed on the line during the entire police investigation, and she could hear the child's voice throughout. "Why won't Mommy play with me anymore? I miss Mommy's hugs. Tell Mommy I'm not scared of the dark anymore." The officers at the scene couldn't hear the child's voice. Only Rachel, through the phone line, could hear Emma talking. Jennifer was taken to a hospital for psychological evaluation. The doctors determined that she was suffering from severe catatonic depression, likely triggered by the anniversary of her daughter's death approaching. But here's what still haunts Rachel. The phone call had lasted for over an hour, with Emma's voice coming through clearly the entire time. When police examined the phone that made the call, they found it in Emma's bedroom, sitting on her small desk next to her coloring books. The phone was a toy phone, a plastic children's play phone that wasn't connected to any phone line. Rachel provided me with the call logs, police reports, medical records, and photos of the toy phone. She also sent me the audio recording of Emma's voice from the 911 call. The audio analysis confirmed that the voice belonged to a young child, approximately 4 years old, speaking with the vocabulary and speech patterns consistent with that age. But Emma Walsh had been dead for 6 months. Rachel believes that Emma was trying to get help for her mother, who had become lost in grief and was slowly fading away from reality. The 911 call might have saved Jennifer's life. She received the psychological help she needed and has slowly begun to recover. Sometimes, it seems, love transcends death. And sometimes, a child's concern for their parent is strong enough to reach across the divide between worlds to ask for help. Emma just wanted someone to take care of her mommy when she couldn't anymore. This fourth story comes from Marcus, a 911 dispatcher in Louisiana who has worked through multiple hurricane seasons and natural disasters. Marcus is used to handling emergency calls during extreme weather, people trapped by flooding, families separated by storms, and communities dealing with power outages and dangerous conditions. But during Hurricane Isabel in August of last year, Marcus received a series of calls that defied every natural explanation he could think of. The storm had brought unprecedented flooding to the parish where Marcus worked. Entire neighborhoods were underwater, and emergency services were stretched to their absolute limit. Marcus had been working 16-hour shifts, coordinating rescues, and trying to get help to people trapped in their homes. At 4:30 a.m., during the height of the storm, Marcus received a call from a landline in the Riverside district, an area that had been completely evacuated 2 days earlier due to flood predictions. 911, what's your emergency? Please help us, said an elderly woman's voice. We're trapped in our house. The water is up to the second floor, and it's still rising. Marcus immediately began gathering information. Ma'am, what's your name and address? My name is Dorothy Williams. I'm at 847 Riverside Drive with my husband Robert. We couldn't evacuate in time, and now the water is too high. We're in the upstairs bedroom, but I'm afraid the house won't hold. Marcus checked his evacuation maps. The Riverside district had been under mandatory evacuation for 48 hours, and according to his information, it was currently under 8 feet of water. Mrs. Williams, I'm going to get help to you, but it may take some time. The rescue boats are dealing with multiple emergencies. Are you both okay? Any injuries? We're scared, but we're not hurt. Robert has his heart medication, so he should be okay for a while. But the water keeps rising. I can hear our downstairs neighbors calling for help too. Marcus made a note to dispatch a rescue boat to 847 Riverside Drive as soon as one became available. But something about the call bothered him. If the area was under 8 feet of water, how was a landline still working? Mrs. Williams, I want you to stay calm. Help is coming. Can you tell me exactly what you can see from your window? Just water everywhere. The Hendersons' house next door. I can only see their roof now. And the Patel family across the street. Their whole house is underwater except for the very top. Marcus continued taking calls throughout the night, but he kept thinking about Dorothy and Robert Williams. When a rescue boat finally became available at dawn, he specifically requested that they check 847 Riverside Drive first. 2 hours later, the rescue team radioed back with information that made Marcus question everything he thought he understood. Dispatch, we're at 847 Riverside Drive. The house is completely underwater, has been for at least 12 hours based on water damage patterns. We checked the second floor, it's flooded up to the ceiling. No one could have survived in this house. Marcus felt confused. Did you check thoroughly? We had a caller reporting they were trapped on the second floor. Negative, dispatch. The second floor is completely submerged. We also checked the neighboring houses the caller mentioned, 845 and 849 Riverside. Both houses have been underwater for hours. No survivors at any of these addresses. But Marcus had spoken to Dorothy Williams for over an hour throughout the night. She had called back 3 more times, providing updates on their condition and asking about rescue estimates. Marcus pulled the call logs and traced the phone number. The landline belonged to Robert and Dorothy Williams at 847 Riverside Drive. But according to utility company records, that phone line had been severed by flood damage at 2 a.m., 2.5 hours before Marcus received the first call. Marcus decided to research the Williams family. What he found made the impossible calls even more disturbing. Robert and Dorothy Williams, ages 73 and 69, had lived at 847 Riverside Drive for 42 years. They had died in their home during Hurricane Katrina in 2005, when they refused to evacuate and were trapped by rising floodwater. Their bodies had been found on the second floor of their house, where they had gone to escape the rising water. But during Hurricane Isabel, Marcus had received 4 separate calls from Dorothy Williams. all from the same phone number, all describing the exact same situation that had killed her and her husband 18 years earlier. In the final call, at 6:15 a.m., Dorothy's voice had changed. "Marcus, thank you for staying with us through the night. It helped to have someone to talk to. Mrs. Williams, the rescue boat is on its way to you right now." "That's very kind, but we don't need rescue anymore. We understand now that we should have left when we had the chance. We just wanted someone to know that we were here, that we didn't just disappear." "Mrs. Williams, tell our daughter Sarah that we're okay now. Tell her we're not trapped anymore. We can finally leave the house." The line went dead. Marcus contacted the Williams' daughter, Sarah, who lived in Texas. She confirmed that her parents had died during Katrina, refusing to evacuate their home of 4 decades. But she also told Marcus something that gave him chills. Every time there was major flooding in Louisiana, Sarah had nightmares about her parents calling for help from their flooded house, with no one able to reach them in time. Marcus provided me with the call recordings, utility company records showing the severed phone line, and death certificates for Robert and Dorothy Williams from 2005. Hurricane Isabel was the first major flood in that area since Katrina. Perhaps Robert and Dorothy Williams had been reliving their final hours every time the waters rose, trapped not just by flood water, but by the regret of not leaving when they could. And perhaps they needed someone to listen, someone to acknowledge that they had been there and had been frightened, before they could finally accept that it was time to go. This final story comes from Lisa, a 911 dispatcher in a small town in Oregon with a population of about 8,000 people. In small towns, dispatchers often know the callers personally. They handle everything from medical emergencies for their neighbors to helping lost pets find their way home. But last spring, Lisa received a call that involved children she had known her entire life, even though those children had been missing for over 20 years. On a Saturday afternoon in May, Lisa was working the day shift when she received what seemed like a routine call about children playing in a dangerous area. 911, what's your emergency? Hi, this is calling to report some children playing near the old quarry on Mill Road, said a woman's voice. I'm worried about their safety. You know how deep that water is. Lisa knew the quarry well. It had been abandoned since the 1980s and had filled with water over the years. The town had posted warning signs because the water was deceptively deep, but kids still occasionally played in the area despite repeated warnings from parents and police. Can you describe the children you saw? Lisa asked. There are 3 of them, 2 boys and a girl, maybe around 8 to 10 years old. One of the boys has red hair and freckles, the other has dark hair. The little girl has blonde pigtails. They're playing on the rocks near the water. Lisa felt a chill. The description was incredibly specific, and something about it was triggering a memory she couldn't quite place. Are the children still there? Can you see them now? Yes, they're still playing by the water. They don't seem to be listening to the warning signs. I'm worried one of them might fall in. Lisa dispatched an officer to check the quarry while keeping the caller on the line. What's your name, and where are you calling from? My name is Janet Morrison. I'm driving by on Mill Road, and I can see them from here. Lisa knew Janet Morrison. She was a local teacher who had lived in town for over 30 years. But something about the children's description was bothering Lisa more and more. Janet, can you describe what the children are wearing? The boy with red hair is wearing a blue t-shirt and jeans. The dark-haired boy has on a red striped shirt. The little girl is wearing a yellow sundress. They look like they're having fun, but that quarry is so dangerous. Lisa's blood went cold. She suddenly remembered why the description sounded so familiar. 23 years earlier, when Lisa was a teenager, 3 children from the town had gone missing during a summer day. 8-year-old Tommy Fletcher, red hair, freckles, 9-year-old Danny Reeves, dark hair, and 7-year-old Melissa Chun, blonde pigtails. They had last been seen playing near the old quarry. Their bodies were never found, despite extensive searches involving divers, helicopters, and hundreds of volunteers. The case remained one of the town's most tragic unsolved mysteries. Lisa remembered the exact clothing descriptions from the missing persons reports because the case had haunted the community for decades. Tommy had been wearing a blue t-shirt and jeans. Danny had been wearing a red striped shirt. Melissa had been wearing her favorite yellow sundress. "Officer Bryant, what's your status at the quarry?" Lisa radioed. "I'm here now, dispatch. No sign of any children. The area is completely empty." Lisa felt her heart pounding. "Janet, are you still there? Can you still see the children?" "Yes, they're waiting. They're looking at me now. All three of them are looking directly at my car." The little girl is waving. "Janet, I need you to describe exactly what you're seeing." "They're walking toward the road now, toward my car." The little girl is smiling and waving. "But this is strange. They look a little faded, like I'm seeing them through fog. And their clothes look wet, even though they weren't in the water." Officer Bryant's voice came over the radio. "Dispatch, I've walked the entire perimeter of the quarry. There are no children here, no footprints, no signs that anyone has been in this area recently." "Janet," Lisa called, "are you still there?" "The little girl just spoke to me," Janet said, her voice now shaky. "She said her name is Melissa, and she asked if I could tell her mommy that she's okay and not to be sad anymore." Lisa felt tears in her eyes. "What else did she say?" "The boy with red hair, Tommy, she called him, said to tell everyone that they're not lost anymore. They said they've been playing together all this time, and they're happy." "Janet, are they still there?" "They're walking back toward the quarry now. But, Lisa, they're not walking on the ground. They're walking on the water. All three of them, just walking across the surface like it's solid ground." Officer Bryant radioed again. "Dispatch, I'm standing at the water's edge. I don't see anything unusual. The quarry is calm, no disturbances on the surface." "Now they're waving goodbye," Janet continued. "All three of them are standing in the middle of the quarry, waving. The little girl, Melissa, she's blowing kisses. And now, they're gone. They just faded away." Lisa sat in stunned silence. She had Janet drive to the police station to give a full statement, and she called in additional officers to search the quarry area one more time. But what happened next convinced everyone involved that something extraordinary had occurred. Within hours of Janet's call, 3 separate families in town reported having vivid dreams about their missing children the night before. Tommy Fletcher's mother, now in her 70s, said she dreamed that Tommy told her he was safe and playing with his friends. Danny Reeves' father had a similar dream. Melissa Chin's parents, who had moved away years earlier, called the police station from 2 states away to report that they had both dreamed about Melissa telling them she wasn't afraid anymore. All of these dreams had occurred the night before Janet's call, and none of the families had spoken to each other about them until after the incident at the quarry. Lisa provided me with copies of Janet's statement, the original missing persons reports from 1999, and documentation of the family's dreams. She also included photos of the 3 children wearing the exact clothing Janet had described. The case of the 3 missing children was never officially solved, but after Janet's sighting, the families finally held memorial services for Tommy, Danny, and Melissa. Sometimes, it seems, the missing aren't lost. They're just waiting for the right moment to let their loved ones know they're okay. And sometimes, after years of wondering and worrying, families need to hear that their children are safe, happy, and not alone. The 3 children of Mill Road Quarry had found each other in death, and they had spent over 20 years playing together, waiting for someone who could see them to deliver one final message. We're okay. Don't be sad anymore.